Polan, can you hear me? Unmute yourself. Polan, can you hear me? Unmute yourself.
এবার শুনতে পাচ্ছ?
হ্যাঁ। So you have enough time to come and grace this occasion.
সেই
Okay, Anirban would not let myself go, so we are almost there. I think I should begin. I think Anirban would.
শুধু এখনো 3টে বাজেনি কিন্তু।
ও আচ্ছা, বাজে, রাইট।
হ্যাঁ, একটু ওয়েট করে যাও। হ্যাঁ।
So I was really overhearing তোমার কবে 29?
আমার 29। আর
Anirban would not let myself go, so we are almost there. I think I should begin.
অনির্বাণ কি এসেছে?
অনির্বাণ এসে গেছে, আমি ওকে একটা এসএমএস করেছিলাম। তোমাকে এক্ষুনি ওয়েলকাম দিল মনে হয়, একটা মেসেজ দেখতে পাচ্ছি।
হ্যাঁ,
এই তো অনির্বাণ এসে গেছে। আই থিঙ্ক উইল বি বিগিনিং।
অনির্বাণ কি এসেছে?
অনির্বাণ এসে সব আছে। সেই I can see that enormously gifted bookshelf at your back, which I had
তোমারটা তো আরো বেশি, তোমারটা দেখেছো?
Which I had the pleasure of kind of viewing long back, but since it has grown in volume.
This is just one part of that bookshelf.
Okay. Means so many other things have been added.
পাশের ঘরে আরো একটা বড় আছে।
Anyway, আচ্ছা, আমি কয়টা ইনিশিয়াল লজিস্টিক্স একটু ঠিক করে নিই। হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে।
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, am I audible?
You're absolutely audible.
Okay.
Sagar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. চলো
I
শুরু
think
করো।
I have put on my audio and camera as well.
Okay.
Yes,
হ্যাঁ, we can see you and we can hear you.
Yes,
and of course we
thank
can
you.
trust you.
Subrata Babu, I can see you very well and I can hear you as well.
That's great. I hope you can trust me as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, welcome to today's the second session, the part of the 7-day web workshop being held uh, under the patronage of Shantipur College, Department of English. I welcome everybody most heartily, and all the participants, attending faculties from different parts of the country. We are so delighted to have you together once again on this platform. And as you know that this workshop is designed and it is mainly meant for the CBCA students, and we had a brilliant beginning yesterday where our honorable VC of Kalyan University, he set the stone rolling by delivering a very what should I say, inspiring and motivational inaugural speech, and it was followed by another short speech, rather I would say a message, blissful message that was sent by the honorable principal of Shantipur College, and today is the second day. And then yesterday, of course, the resource person, Professor Mira Mujumdar, she had a wonderful session, very productive session indeed. We have got very wonderful feedbacks from different parts of the participating people. So today we're hoping it is going to be another very productive, disciplined, well-organized session, and of course very richly beneficial for the students. And in today's session, as you all know, as it was declared in the program list, that we are going to have a very significant special lecture from Professor Sagar Mandal, one of the most respected figures in terms of graphic narrative and post-colonial studies as well as diaspora studies, and we feel so honored that he has agreed to deliver his speech, I would say much awaited speech, and it is so eagerly awaited from different parts. The participants, we have got serious what should I say repercussions also, that this text is going to be very crucial, because this text is not that much discussed, so it remains a bit unexplored so far. So it is going to be a very crucial session, as you hope it to be. And before I begin, I would like to once again convey the greetings that I have received from the Honorable Principal of Shantipur College. She has conveyed her heartfelt good wishes, and she has also expressed her deep gratitude for today's, resource person, Professor Sagar Taranga Mandal, and especially he has been working on this field for quite some time, as you all know, and he's all set to submit his PhD thesis, which is going to be a very landmark work, as it is expected to be, from Jadavpur University. So we are so happy to have him today among us, and all the viewers across the nation who are already we have been joined by. So welcome, uh, uh, everybody is welcome. Now, as today's session has earlier announced, that Bhimayana, Experiences of Untouchability, this text is going to be critically discussed by Professor Mandal. And everybody knows that it's a graphics narrative, rather novel, which was published in 2011, and it was hailed as one of the top 5 graphic novels by CNN. So, but still it remains to be discussed in elaborate term. So we are going to have it today. So without wasting much time, I would like to invite most cordially Professor Mandal to inaugurate its speech. And another point, I must say that we have also been joined by Professor Kullan Kumar Das, another very prominent authoritative figure as far as Dalit literature is concerned in general, and Bhimayana Ambedkar study is concerned in particular. So we are so fortunate, and we also welcome him most heartily to our session. Now, I have already consumed much time, not more time to be consumed, and now I would like to invite Professor Mandal to begin his today's special discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Roy, for such a warm introduction. And I think before I begin, I must congratulate all you people who have been behind this huge and extraordinarily organized event, bringing scholars and enthusiasts from all across universities and academic spaces into this discussion. And I have a few requests, since I will be presenting a few high definition images. And if there is any glitch in the presentation or in the transmission of images, please let me know through the chat box. Because since we are talking about comics, I think we cannot talk about comics if we don't discuss images. We can actually understand the process of manufacture that kind of goes behind comics and how you read comics, essentially as an act of pleasure. Reading comics give you a lot of fun, reading comics give you a lot of happiness. But in recent years, reading comics has developed a mechanism or a dynamic of its own. And it has a few rules, a few operative terms, which I will be inclined to discuss. So even before I begin a discussion of Bhimayana, I think a bit of time should be spent on how we take up a comics. We take up a comic sometimes for fun. The element of pleasure, the element of leisure has been integrally related to the idea of reading comics. And only in recent years, we have actually moved away from seeing this genre of reading comics, away from something which is not fun. We are trying to see this activity as a more serious, as a more rigorous and academic discipline, which requires laborious reading, which requires laborious circuitous engagement. Now, a few more things that I need to talk about before I just go headlong into the text. That when we talk about Bhimayana and its emotional and other experiential models that are there, it talks about Bhimarao Ambedkar. But what is interesting to know that it has a formal grammar of its own. It has a specific way which allows you to enter its story world. Now, unless you are well grounded through those entry points, that I am picking up Bhimayana, I am reading what? At a very rudimentary, at a very basic level, I am reading a sequential narrative. A very slipshod and a very commonplace way to put it would be that I am actually looking at reels of a film. I am actually looking at the reels of a cinema which have been frozen. Now, this is what we should not do, because the moment I am trying to give you an analogy about reading comics through this cinematic idiom, what did I just tell you? I tell you that comics is a sequential art form. So I am kind of beginning with the definition of comics. Of course, it kind of comes from European and Western traditions, and we'll very shortly see how Bhimayana explodes this tradition. Vimana, this comics is at a juncture of so many things. It is at the heart of how the Indian visual arts industry kind of negotiated this talent from the margins, the subaltern talent, so to say. So, when you pick up Vimayana, you must understand that you are not only engaging with a verbal and visual form. Comics, the definition which the comics master Will Eisner gives you is that comics is a sequential art form. It employs both visuals and it employs both verbal expressions, captions, speech images, words. Now, this collaboration can be extremely problematic. Why it is problematic, I'll be coming to that in a short while. But the point I am insisting before even we pick up these comics, the comics by Durga by Vyam and Subhash Vyam, we must understand that this comics has a special grammar of its own. It will allow you to understand its sequence of experiences. And if I have to use a very difficult term, I would kind of explain all these operative terms like sequential, the other, terms that I use when I talk about comics. I will be explaining that when you pick up this comics, and in order to understand the experiences that are drawn and expressed there, you have to understand how it works. In other words, you have to understand its basic grammar. Now, the basic grammar, how the images and the words come together to give you the sense of a moving image. Again, look, the mistake that I have already committed, I have already spoken about comics in terms of films. Now, this is also my research that I have been continuing for the last couple of years, that let us start talking about comics through its proper and special grammar. Let us not try to understand, the more we try to do this, it leads to lot many critical mistakes. Let us try to talk about comics through the very specific grammar it itself possesses. I would use a different word for the comics grammar. I prefer to use the word or the term comics infrastructure. That there is, try to see comics as a building with many windows and doors, and it has a special material quality to it. That you pick up a comic, you read it, and immerse yourself, enter into its story world, which in the comics parlance is known as diegesis, the diegetic world, the story world of a comic. Now, how is it possible? Okay, so there are two very distinct traditions of understanding a comic, and especially when we are dealing with an exploding prolific narrative like Vimayana, which is so very different from the other comics that you read or that you have read, both from Western European canons and also closure homes. For example, I am sure that there in my audience today, there are many people, and especially for Bengal and outside Bengal, people must have read the iconic comic arts that we have come across, and we still come across in form of Indrojal comics. We have all just a moment. Am I audible and visible? Just a check. Hello. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are perfectly audible, visible. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we have come across different forms of comics like Indrojal comics. We all know the name of Arunnodev and Phantom. We all know, Amor Chitra Katha series. We all know Chacha Chaudhuri and Pran, and there are diverse other forms of comics that we have come across in our own Bengal. We have we still have Nonte Fonte, Hada Voda, and Batul the Great. There, I'm sure in my audience, many people who have come across Tintin have reveled in the world of Tintin, right? So what I am pointing at is a diverse tradition of comics making. Now, unless we spend a bit of time on comics making, and the point that I was trying to insist, that if you are not well trained in what is the art form that this comic we'll be discussing today, Bhimayana, is all about, your experience of that comic is foreclosed. Even before you begin the comic, and I am here talking about Bhimayana, even before you open the page and look at its forms, and its form is a Gondi art form. I'll be talking, my lecture is actually moving towards that Gondi art form, even before you have understood its, your experiences, the comics has allowed it, given you forays into its story world, the experience and the affect of it falls flat. So the first thing we must do, that we must understand that, well, this is a sequential art form. This is the verbal and the visual images and prose in captions, in word bubbles. So, just to give you a very quick glimpse of what is, this has to be a very rudimentary thing, that, this is a word bubble. If this is a figure, this is a word bubble, or a speech bubble, as you know it, right? So here is caption, here is a figure who is, talking to you or kind of doing whatever he pleases, and there is this, bubble that you find. Okay. Now this is a speech bubble. Now I apologize because I cannot use other more sophisticated forms of projection, but I think this will do the work. But this is a speech bubble. What is this? This is a speech bubble. Now you will also come across a word when you read comics, which is known as a thought bubble. Now what is a thought bubble? And a person in a comic is thinking. So you just make this bubble and give this small, minute. So it's not an arrow, but it becomes the small bubbles, kind of connecting you to a figure. So this is a bubble. This is a thought bubble.
Sagar,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We can't
yes.
see you. তোমার ভিডিওটা একটু অন করো.
Okay. Okay, am I visible now?
Yes, you are.
I am visible. Thank you.
Yes.
I just needed this interventions a bit, where because the internet, the Wi-Fi is horrible today. So anyway, what I was talking about, so let us kind of, the limited time we have got, let us talk about that. What is the specific grammar of Bhimayana? It has a specific, how it combines the verbal, the speeches, the articulations, and the visual, its specific tradition of drawing, how it brings them together into a sequential collaboration and expresses its affects and experiences. Because if you read the title of our graphic novel today, Bhimayana, Experiences of Untouchability. Now, how to convey this experience? Let me kind of, before I go into the spectacular history that lies behind Bhimayana. Nobody talks about the spectacular history that lies behind Bhimayana. And you know about these two artists, Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, who have drawn these Gondi or Gond images, this anthropocentric, animal-like, fluid images. But who is the precursor of this art? And the precursor of this art, I think that some scholars should actually go into and talk about this. because the precursor of Gondi, because I'm kind of, just going ahead my lecture, but just kind of, give you the overview what will follow. The precursor of this art is not Durgabai Vyam, or Subhash Vyam, but Jangar Singh Shyam. Now, if you not have heard of this name, I repeat the name, Jangar Singh Shyam. He was the person who brought Gondi art, or the art form that you see in Bhimayana, into prominence. But why do I actually take up the name of this man who is no more with us? Jangar Singh Shyam, Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, who followed in his footsteps. Jangar Singh Shyam committed suicide, and it is one of the most mysterious and enigmatic suicides. He killed himself while in an artist residency away in Japan. He killed himself. And this is one of the most enigmatic, mysterious, and celebrated in a way that people talk about excavating the real reasons, but no such solid efforts are yet forthcoming. Now, if you have not heard of this man, you will not be ready to take up Bhimayana. And his suicide is one of the most, unexplored and yet mysterious events in the world of Indian visual history. Jangar Singh Shyam. So what I have already done before you, I have given you a fairly, intimidating idea. There is nothing to be scared of. I can see many students, I know some of them are coming in. So people who know that the kind of medium I work with, but I am trying to tell you two things. I just have two expectations from this audience, that if you are trying to read comics and you are trying to convert comics into a serious academic discipline, we cannot anymore. And I think this has not been forthcoming in the recent years.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mandal. You are not visible at this moment,
There is
something. You are still invisible.
I am still invisible, but
yes. Yes, now you are visible.
Okay, I think Shubrata Babu, it's just the Wi-Fi. Just let me know when I'm invisible. I'll just switch off and switch on again. The moment I'm switching on, I'm visible. Just signal me. I thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Go on.
Thank you so much. Okay, so so I have only when we start reading, we have comics. We have to keep two things in mind, and that what I was talking about. That we have not been able to do this. Whenever we talk about comics, it comes out as a very non-serious, a very, it's something which is related to leisure. Of course, it is related to leisure. Looking at comics is a very felicitous event. It gives you a lot of happiness. It kind of immerses you into a different world. I don't want to take that experience away from you, because the moment it goes, the reading of comics, it's very difficult. But have you ever considered the fact that with comics, from its very origin, the idea of leisure has been associated? In your very leisurely afternoons, you will pick up a Batul the Great or Nonte Fonte or Chacha Chaudhuri. You will build all your childhood world around it. You'll imagine yourself in the place of Arunnadev or Flash Gordon or Bahadur or Tinkle or the various heroes of Amar Chitrapatha. So if you keep this in point, now let me ask you this. Will you be able to bring the same amount of happiness, felicity, or richness, or pleasure of reading when you talk about or when you read a comics like Bhimayana, which talks about the exclusion of a category of human beings? When you talk about when a comics talks about untouchability, when comics is actually talking about how a young boy was not allowed to drink water in his school premises. My question is, what kind of experience or affect does it generate? Does it in any way hinder your pleasure? So, I think someone, okay. So does it anyway hinder your pleasure? So two things here. The way you read Nonte Fonte or Batul the Great or Chacha Chaudhuri would not be the same as when you pick up Vimayana. Now, obviously, you can say that both these formats are different. Of course, these formats are different. Their subject matters are different, right? One talks about the injuries and the vulnerabilities of caste distinction, and another talks about other elements. For example, sci-fi, science fiction elements, or other elements which are not reliant on bodily or injuries or exclusion that you find in Vimayana. I give you that. I understand that these two genres or these two comics might have different subject matters. But one thing that you must understand, that all comics have a grammar, a combination of the visual and the verbal, and that is the point where Vimayana differs from these comics, right? Now, I have already mentioned to you about Jangar Singh Shyam, and before I go into Vimayana, no, you will only be able to then, and this is the cautionary tale that I was trying to provide, and this is the proviso or stipulation even before you pick up this comic, that you have to know who Jangar Singh Shyam is, what is the kind of art these two people, Durgavai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, produce, what is the nature of their art, how this art was brought into prominence, and how it clashes with other visual mediums. And I'll be using very two provocative terms, that how it clashes with more Western hegemonic and Sanskritized or Brahmanical forms of visual arts. These are very provocative, problematic terms, but I will show you how Vimayana differs from that. So once you know the extent, the machinations of the Gond art, which you find in Vimayana, you will be able to read the comics. So all what I have said till now, so all this preliminary, this introduction is about to let you handle these comics, to give you a reading route, give you a reading map that you can, once you are able to acquire that, you'll be able to, engage with this very fluid form of art form that you find in Vimayana. So without, wasting any more time, let me actually present you a very important art form. What I will be kind of, showing you, panels from Amar Chitra Katha first, right? And then I will show you. So this is how, now, so we are kind of started to get our hands dirty. Now we'll show what is the actual visual grammar of, Vimayana, and how it differs from your reading of Pran's Chacha Chaudhuri or Anand Spi's Amar Chitra Katha or Nonte Fonte or Batul the Great. Why Vimayana is so important? Why Vimayana has been kind of set down by CNN as the 5 most important graphic novels that has come from the Indian subcontinent, right? Now, let us, okay, just let me present this. Okay, I think, is the panel visible? Anyone can respond?
Yes, visible, but a bit darkened.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Not that clear.
Okay. I am just increasing the resolution. Okay, just a second. I think this would, I think, is a better.
Yes, much better and quite beautifully visible. Go on.
Okay, so so what you are seeing here is, can you see this animal? Can anyone respond? Hello?
Yes, it is visible, a
Okay,
darkened
okay.
body.
Yes.
Okay. So just a second, Now, okay, I think it's there, right? So
Much prominent.
okay, so this is a painting done by our very own the one of the people who have kind of visualized Bhimayana. This is a Gondi painting or Gond painting by Durgabai Vyam. Right, it depicts a village scene where people are actually fishing, washing their utensils, swimming. And one thing that you must notice that in Gondi painting, apart from birds and trees, the element or depiction of water becomes very important. So I'm sure that if you have read Vimayana, even for once, you have come across the depiction of water in such fluid visual iconography. I would like to show you one more important so this no what you are seeing right now is an is an image. It's a kind of it's the Gondi painting done by none other than Jangar Singh Shyam, the man who kind of brought the kind of art form that you see in Vimayana brought to prominence. Now it's a picture of a dog, a dog which is kind of moving forward, and yet it is startled. Okay, and you can see this blue beads around its eyes, kind of looking backwards. Now again, in the other picture or the other image of the village scene that I discussed of Durgabai Vyam, you could see the water motif, depiction of water bodies, finding prominence in her Gondi artwork. The Gondi artworks are actually very big, not less than 24 by 25 centimeter, which kind of exceeds the normal landscape that is provided through a comics, through a comic book. Now, so you have this very celebrated picture by Jangar Singh Shyam. You can what you actually read in this beautiful creature, you can see red beads. It's a very abstract art. It is done entirely in black, and Jangar stopped from decorating the entire body of the animal because someone stopped him from doing it, because that person told Jangar that if you decorate and ornament the entire body of the animal, this dog, with beads, it will lose its European dimension. I don't know whether Jangar was very pleased with the suggestion, but he kept it like that. So you have blue beads around the eyes of this animal, a dog, and you have red beads also kind of spiraling around its neck. So the red beads stand for agitation. Someone has startled the dog is actually moving forward, it is startled, and it is just looking back. Right. Now, okay, Shubhrata Babu, am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible, but like Arunadhi have gone invisible,
Okay. Am I visible now?
No, not now yet,
Okay. Okay, it will come back.
Now you're visible. Yes, go on,
okay.
visible.
Just the presentation lag. So so the pictures that you just saw by Jangar Singh Shyam, I can't hear you. Hello? Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yes, sir.
অনির্বাণ বলো, মানে আমাকে শোনা আর দেখা যাচ্ছে কি?
Yeah.
হ্যাঁ স্যার, দেখা যাচ্ছে এবং শোনা যাচ্ছে, কিন্তু মাঝে মধ্যে
এখন কি শোনা
একটু
যাচ্ছে,
ডিস্টার্ব
দেখা যাচ্ছে?
হচ্ছে স্যার। হ্যাঁ।
Okay. It's just the Wi-Fi that is kind of playing havoc. The camera and the audio is on,
Okay.
but they are suddenly going off. I sincerely apologize for that. Okay, just give me a signal or write me in the chat box that there is a bit of disruption, but we are trying to do our best. So let me kind of take you through what Jangar did. Now, the Jangar Singh Shyam, who actually invented this form of artistic production that you see, very fluid, very anthropomorphic, which kind of obviously in Bhimayana you will find that even everyday material commodities are kind of drawn in the image of animals. Very fluid, very plural, very critics have kind of labeled the Gondi art that you see in Bhimayana as very hybrid, as a mixed genre. Right. Now, how it is different from other comics. Now, today it is not possible to go to each European and Western canon and kind of study its difference, but let us start with something which is very closer home. For example, let us start with Amar Chitrakatha. Right. Now, Amar Chitrakatha, which was founded by the editor Anand Pai, did two things. First of all, it kind of played a very middle game that for the Indian middle class household, comics was not something a serious enough enterprise. What Amar Chitrakatha did, it was able to Sanskritize its visual form. Now, obviously, Amar Chitrakatha, delves in martyrs, our glorious heroes, But what it essentially followed, it followed even the name you see, Amar Chitra Katha, which kind of suggests opposition to the comics tradition that you see abroad, that you see with Tintin, Amar Chitra Katha. So memorializing of the past. So it followed a very rudimentary comics format. Now I am actually talking about how comics works. And what is this rudimentary comics format? Amar Chitra Katha, did something very simple. It used, a very conventional Western grid. Now, this is a very important word if you have to, deal with comics. What is a grid? And what is a tunnel? Now, grid is a mechanism. It is a process of how you arrange panels on a comics page. As simple as that. I will not kind of go into the complicated history, how this term came into, presence, and who kind of conceived of it. Gridding is very simple. When you look at comics, you find rectangular boxes with speech. And you go from one box to the other. You essentially do a left to right reading, right? So, panels, if this is a page, these are rectangular boxes, these are panels, right? So in a Amar Chitra Katha comic, you will find a series of rectangular boxes. You will find a series of rectangular windows, frames or panels. You move from one panel to the other. And there are speech boxes to kind of help you. But there is one, so you have learned one operative term. You have come across the word grid. What is grid? How do you arrange panels on a comic surface? It is not a very hard and fast rule that you can use the entire page to just show one image. So your entire page contains just one panel, which in the comics lexicon is known as the splash page, an evocative page, an explosion, as if the image is kind of has possessed of certain three-dimensionality and it is going out of the comics page itself. It has kind of, gained a corporeality, a sense of physical dimension of its own. It is kind of sucking you into the comics world. So, there is no hard and fast rule that there has to be 6 windows on the comics page itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The entire single comics page can have one image and one panel, which in the comics format is known as the splash page. Now, Amar Chitra Katha usually follows this traditional format of panels. It follows a traditional format of gridding, arrangement of panels. You will find rectangular boxes with images in it, and they kind of move from one to the next. But here we come to another most important thing of comics reading. What I am trying to essentially do, people might say that I am not actually talking about Bhimayana per se, because we cannot talk about Bhimayana per se unless I teach you these 3, talk about these 2 or 3 things, kind of equip you how you read a comic, its affective and experiential structure. So one, you have understood that gridding, that how you arrange panels, for example, just a second, justice. I'm sorry about this. So, I am showing you something absolutely different. I think this is how we kind of extend the frontiers of comics reading. So, let us kind of get you to a different form of comic art. So, for example, so this is a comic on the Middle East, where you will find a depiction of a massacre. The Israeli army is committing a massacre, killing Arabs back during the year 1956. And this comics is by Joe Sacco. People who read comics know Joe Sacco. So the name of the comics is Footnotes in Gaza. So Joe Sacco here, he is investigating, a little known massacre. He has gone into the Middle East and investigating. So, here you will find this comic, right? I'll just put it here. Okay. Now, what you find here are rectangular boxes. Okay, and you can see that the box or the panel, the length, it can change, right? But what I really want to show you is that, for example, another. So this is a very conventional comics format where you have panels or windows. A comics person is at its liberty to how I arrange this. This is known as gridding, right? But okay, but it can also assume forms like this, where you are kind of making small panels within panels, right? Now, what Bhimayana does is move away from this format, not only in its panels or kind of arrangements, but it also does away with a very important thing. And that is the most important uniqueness of Bhimayana by way of its grammar of reading, by way of its visual politics, by way of its visual grammar, that it does not have a gutter. G-U-T-T-E-R. Now, what is this gutter? Now, gutter, when you look at Bhimayana, for example, there are no, rectangular windows or square windows. There are no rectangular or square windows. It is a full page. In fact, I must say, if I have to talk in terms of technique, Bhimayana is entirely composed of splash pages. It does away with conventional compartmentalization, conventional boxing of experiences and affect or emotional sex. As if it gives you the idea, and I think this is one of the first experience you get when you read Bhimayana, that the experience of humiliation and the experience of exclusion is actually spilling out of the comic. It cannot be compartmentalized, it cannot be put into conventional boxes, like the way or the kind of either the mechanism or the system that you see in conventional comics like Amar Chitra Katha. Right. So I must say that the entire book of Bhimayana is composed of splash pages, exploding pages. And these are also in the comics term, and it will kind of connect with the experiential analogy, the emotional landscape of Bhimayana, that these pages bleed into each other. These are also known as bleeds, B-L-E-E-D. So it will spill out. These are not compartmentalized. But having said this, there is one more important thing, and that's what I was actually talking about. That Bhimayana does not have gutters. What are gutters? Now, in a cinema, again, I am kind of reverting to the analogy of the cinema, that you are kind of seeing a moving reel without any gap. Obviously, there are other cinematic techniques that, there is a fade in and a fade out, a scene would kind of transform to the next scene. But comics does not have such mechanics at its disposal. Comics has a very simple thing and a very beautiful thing. It has the gutter. Now, without wasting much time, what is a gutter? Now, what I have told before I have begun this lecture, a very rudimentary definition of comics, that comics is a sequential art form. It combines both the verbal and the visual, right? But essentially, when you read a comics, okay, and and a very important reminder, I should have already given you this, that I am using the word comics, not comic, and this is a distinction that you must make. A comic book and comics. Comics is essentially a format, right? You can use the term in the plural. Comics is a format. So again, coming back to the concept or the top of the gutters. Now gutters, so a comic space is essentially static. Like a film or a cinema that you are seeing, people are not moving and milling around you. Obviously you can turn the pages, but that has a different name as well. So comics has gutters. And what is a gutter? And this is something that you will find in every comic that you have read. From Amar Chitrakontha to Nonte Fonte, Batul the Great, Chacha Chaudhuri and Pran, Arunnodev. Comics, and this is a very important thing, comics is the white space between the rectangular boxes. In every comic, conventional form of comic, you will find a white space. Just this little margin. This little margin. How one panel is, and you will get in every comic. It is Nonte Fonte, Adaboda, Batul the Great. This is known as the gutter, the guttural space, right? So these small white space is very important, and I have kind of, and this is very important because it unfreezes the comics page. What it does, it unfreezes it. It gives the comics page motion. It gives the comics page a pace forward. How? Suppose you are seeing a Superman panel. Superman is hit by a bullet. And in the next panel, you find the Superman is not visible in the panel. So the gutter allows you to imagine what has happened in between. So the white space is the imaginative, and the word that I have been using quite repeatedly during the course of my lecture is affective. It helps you to connect the actions together. So that is the difference between a comic book and a cinema. In cinema, there is a white space. A cinema is a moving, continuous reading. But comics does not have that advantage. That how do I connect the scenes? So the comics invites the reader that you must connect the scenes. You must connect these two rectangular panels. And imagine for yourself, or the word that I am prone to using, re-visualize for yourself what has happened in between. So, I'm trying to kind of put in a lot of things within this small space of time. Two things have come out. One is gutter, the white space between panels. It helps you to imagine how the action has unfolded between the panels, what has happened. So it kind of incites and excites the reader's imagination and visualization. The other is this concept of the grid, that how do you arrange the panels? How do you arrange these rectangular boxes on the page? And how do you use the white space? Now let us go to Bhimayana, having understood this. But I think if 3 or 4 words, would do good when we talk about Chandgar Singh Shyam once more, if we have the time. So Bhimayana radically does away with these things. Bhimayana will not follow the conventional pattern of gridding. Bhimayana does not have ordinary panel boxes, conventional panel boxes. And since it does not have panels, rectangular boxes here, each panel of Bhimayana follows a different guttural exposition, different guttural technique. Are there rectangular boxes? No. There are no rectangular boxes. Right. Now, another thing is that since it will not follow such a conventional greeting pattern, its gutters are exploded. And this is the most important thing to remember when you take up or when you engage with the visual grammar of Vimayana, that it gutters. It does not have any white space. The visual storytelling in Vimayana is not confined to a white space between panels. It does not have the conventional layout of panels. So, visually, what kind of a artistic statement it is trying to make? Obviously, that it will not follow the kind of, visual techniques which mainstream visual arts or media have followed. By exploding its gutters, by doing away with gutters, with white spaces, so where is the gutter here? You will find that it is a very innovative use of compartmentalized storytelling. No, how do you read? The essential dilemma is when you take up a page like this, there are 2 or 3 very important visual metaphors that are replete in Vimayana. First is water. Second is the transformation of material, commodities, material artifacts like a vase into an animal form. So can you say that what is the affective function of this? The only function, we are open to discussion. Obviously, we will have questions. But one thing that when they depict animals, like the very important drawing that I have shown of Jangar Singh Shyam, they are actually bringing into their storytelling a vigilante stance. That people are always on the alert. People are looking back. People are afraid. People are surveilled. Now, I think when, and this is a very important thing to understand in terms of Vimayana, because as I have said earlier, that the water motif becomes a very important thing. The moment Dalits in the story world of Bhimayana touch water or come close to water bodies, riots break out and various forms of exclusionary acts follow. Dalits are, are shown their place, they are chastised, they are kind of banned from using public arenas. So water becomes a very important visual metaphor here. Now, water is fluid, water flows around, and maybe this water symbolism is what Durga Bai and Subhash is using to use, instead of gutters, that they use small riverine bodies in place of conventional square boxes to kind of, to give a pattern or an organization to Vimayana's story world. Because the first thing that, kind of really troubles you, that where do I begin and where do I end? When I start with a text like Vimayana, and that is exactly the precise politics of Vimayana, that this is an exploding network. The image has spilled into your lived environment. The image is not kind of put in boxes. There are, again, I'm kind of continuously repeating that these are the 2 very important things that we must understand when we deal with a comics like Vimayana, that it is not like Amar Chitrokatha visualization, right? It is not like a comics setting team. It will use animal imageries and one of the very important functions, and also water imageries, but one of the very important functions of these 2 imageries is that water is trying to find a way, Just like the Dalit visual aesthetics or the Dalit visual art form tries to kind of locate itself within a very mainstream medium. Right. Now, Jangar Singh Shyam, the person who kind of invented this Gondi form of art, and who actually committed a suicide away in Japan during an artist residency, because people say that he was actually squeezed between the demands of the commercial markets, and he could not follow the freedom of his own art. And that is one of the very enigmatic suicides that is still left unexplored. So Jangar Singh Shyam was discovered by a man called Swaminathan. So he was discovered in a remote village in Madhya Pradesh, and who was brought back to Bhopal, and he was kind of made to kind of accommodate his art into the mainstream visual market. Right, and that saw the first rise of this Gondi form of art. 20 years back, you could just kind of go into various fairs and buy a beautiful Gondi art form for a price, say 500 rupees. Now this is not anymore possible. You have to dish out between 5 to 14 lakhs. So, you have also to keep in mind the commercialization that has since taken place when Jangar erupted into the scene, when prolific writers, people who kind of did this graphic text, erupted onto the scene. So Bhimayana, is located at a very specific juncture. Jangar Singh Shyam came onto the scene, popularized the Gondi form of art, right? And then Bhimayana came. And another trajectory followed for this Gondi tradition of painting, which became commercialized. And Jangar could not adapt himself to this, burgeoning commercial politics. He committed suicide, and I still think an investigation, a body of art work should kind of look into this, the death of the Dalit graphic artist. If we can kind of put Jangar Singh Shyam into such a category. So, again, to reiterate the fact that the visual idiom that comes across when you, and this I'm trying to just kind of summarize it for you, that what essentially, narratively speaking, Bhimayana tells you. It tells you about the exclusion, and most importantly, and I think this is something we usually miss when you talk about Bhimayana, that it talks about an affective atmosphere, an emotional atmosphere of humiliation. How do you present humiliation? Now you are drawing, you are talking about it. But how do you present humiliation on the flat surface of a comics? How you create an affective depth in a comic's depth, in a comic surface? Because if comics is about relaying a lived reality, how essentially a comic like Bhimayana, which kind of does away with all conventional Western visual forms of glamour, the comics that is so different, that the comics will not follow, the kind of color or the kind of boxing or the kind of visual arrangement that you will find in Montefonte or Tintin. Now, how do you talk about Dalit humiliation and its affective politics, again, to repeat this, on the flat surface of a comic book? A comic book doesn't work if it does not give you the idea of depth, or it creates depth cues. Now, that has been lacking, and that nobody talks about that, how you immerse yourself into the comic book, which is essentially trying to talk about humiliation. And talking about this politics of humiliation in the context of untouchability, it also brings us back to the point that does Bhimayana actually tell you that how you need to fight back humiliation? So how is it mobilizing its anti-humiliatory tactics? Does it kind of go back to the Brahminical or the Savarna tradition that is depicted again and incorporated within the Gondi art form, and kind of gives you an arsenal that's obviously talks about education, agitation, and other forms of, elements at your disposal where you can transcend the element of humiliation and seclusion and exclusion. But the question again is, because you are dealing with a visual verbal form here, that how you kind of implicate and embroil the reader. Look, this person, Bhimrao Ambedkar, on his school premises is not allowed to drink water, or when he is on a sightseeing scene in Baroda, there is a possibility that a riot might be, breaking between the Mahars who are traveling the scene and the upper caste people who do not want the Mahars to use the village pond. Now, how do you imagine? The question actually boils down to the, and again, narratively speaking, a person who is actually dealing with a Dalit text would say that the question actually boils down to a lived reality. That how you do kind of convey this lived reality. But you don't have the mechanics of a cinema. You don't have audio. How do you kind of convey this effective framework to the comics reader? By creating depths, and this is where, and I'm almost towards the, I have taken a lot more time, I think. This is where, Bhimayana is able to create depths, proliferation of the comics page, that you almost kind of feel through the comics grammar that the book or the page or the experience or the narration does not end here. It goes into a domain of intertextuality. It is spilling out, and it is implicating your own lived reality. And it does by these two simple things, that it does away with the idea of grids, no conventional boxes in your page. It uses two very basic metaphors of water and animals the animals are always given a vigilante pose. They're always alert, they're always looking back, as if someone is kind of looking at them, someone is calling them from the back, and this motif has sustained in Bhimayana. From that picture that I have showed, a very big image that was drawn by Jandar Singh Shia, that people, they cannot relax, and that is one of the very important finding or kind of realization that I have read, that I don't find characters in Dalit narratives. There are other Dalit visual narratives that are coming out slowly, but I don't find when there is such a kind of conjunction between Dalit personalities being kind of portrayed with a different animal exhibit with an animal quality. I think this is not a kind of a derogatory point. What Durgabai and Subhash wants to kind of push this quality of vigilantism, this quality that a Dalit out in the public space always needs to be alert. Someone is always interpellating them, calling out, hey, why you are touching the village pond? So this is a very consistent thing that you will find in Bhimayana. So two things before, very quickly, that I need to kind of repeat, that it does not have the conventional pattern of panelization. It does not have gutters or white spaces. In fact, the entire Bhimayana is composed of splash pages. And even if you try that, under the constraints of the mainstream book market, these two artists are kind of forced to kind of adopt conventional Western forms of comics drawing. They would convert these boxes and the gutters into serpentine, fluid, and plural images like a snake or a python or a flowing river. I think I have overshot my time by quite some time. Subroto Babu, I think we can kind of have a few questions I think that would be all. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. It has been so engaging and absorbing, We have been absolutely captivated,
I am
Now,
extremely sorry that I took a bit of time. I just got carried away. But people are busy here. Kollan is here. He is extremely busy. Sanjay Babu is there. You are there. Chondripati, I could see her for some time. I am really delighted that all of you could find some time to come in and kind of, and I apologize for the Wi-Fi speed also, but to the extent we could do it. And thank you,
it
Anirban.
was relevant, because how, yeah, actually, when you were talking about Arunodem, sometimes you have gone invisible, and it goes with the spirit of comics, Comic characters might go sometimes invisible, like Arunodem or Phantom. Now, Dr. Anirban Bhattacharya is coming up, and he will be, having his own ideas and thoughts about the special lecture delivered by Professor Mandal. Anirban, please.
Thank you, Professor Sagar Taranga Mandal. Thank you for this really fascinating, brilliantly fascinating lecture. Very informative, very intimate, detailed, insightful. And this is absolutely in parity with the notion or the motto of the workshop that we have earlier designed or thought of, conceived of. And thank you very much. And I was thinking of, or I was wondering to pitch in a query that is connected with the question that you raised at the very opening, at the very beginning of your lecture, that about the diegesis and comic infrastructure. The two segments are interconnecting together. And I was thinking of Ambedkar when he was talking about theorizing about axiomatic equality and how it is being performed at the level of reality or mundane trivialities, and the performative contradiction, the contradictory pools in the course of its performance. And I was wondering how this can be tackled or thought of or gogged at the level of comics, when this kind of contradictory pools can be visualized or can be thought of through visual metaphors. That you were talking about water, Savada tongue in the Declaration of Independence, that brilliantly coming out in the text as performative figures, and how this question of contradiction, that performative contradiction, can be tackled through this medium of comic art. That is the question. And with this question, I would like to invite Professor Kalyan Kumar Das, faculty at the Department of English, Presidency University, to act as a discussant or respondent to this lecture and the text as well. Kalyan.
Acha, I just want to have one intervention to make. Am I audible?
Sure. Yes.
You are audible.
I was wondering, since it is actually, it is always useful to talk about comics in a workshop format, where you are able to actually kind of draw up on a whiteboard and actually kind of give you the different comics books in place. I was wondering, because this workshop, since it is kind of primarily meant for the students, the kind of the kind of images I was showing from by Jangar Singh Shyam, the proponent of Gondi art, and which is actually through him I will actually answer Anirban's question, that it is not readily available for all our students, right? Because the text sometimes can be very expensive. I was suggesting that at my disposal I have a few people who, for people or faculty, people who are actually kind of taking up Bhimayana during their courses, during their semesters, that at a later date, at a time of your convenience, I would be extremely happy to kind of mail you those images. But I have almost 60 to 70 Gondi images of art forms that I have collected over the years, so that actually you can use them as resources during your meeting.
Oh, that would be very lovely. Very
because it is very difficult for students to procure them. They are extremely costly, expensive. The books have gone out of print. I don't know when. Obviously, publishers like Nabayana are kind of waking up to this possibility, and they are doing a lot. But I think just going into a village, into a Madhya Pradesh, and kind of documenting them at work, taking them through their life narratives. I think if I could kind of, just, you people would be busy, but let me know. I would be able to send you a few documents and the images. There is a kind of quite a few images. So that would be fun, because you can actually kind of use them as a resource. And I would be happy if my comics creed increases. Okay, but this I would be glad to share my resources. Just let me know when you are at your disposal to do so. It would be very easy. Those are high resolution images, but I really want my my colleagues and my students to kind of go through them.
Well, that would be great. That would be great. That would be very beneficial to the students, and we can circulate among all the participants via this mail, and we can also compile it in the ebook.
Absolutely. That was my idea.
At the end of the workshop, some of them, of course. So
I think Kolnan, we are all waiting.
No, I was.
We have bored you to death, but I think
not really. It was a wonderful talk, Sagar. Please don't be modest. No, thank you, Anirban, for having me here today. Sagar, I will wait for your response to Anirban's question, because I also had similar kinds of questions in my mind as I was listening to your talk. So I will wait for that response from you, and then we will carry that discussion forward. I think that will be better.
Okay. So, Anirban, should I respond to your question?
Sure, please.
Okay, Anirban, I think, as you have seen in this, am I visible, Anirban?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, as you have seen, the half of this lecture was taken up talking about jungle fish. Okay. If I have to kind of, break down my lecture, what did I actually speak about? I actually spoke about two very important things. That you will not be able to understand the affective structure, that how it emotionally affects you. And I am really cutting down on the jargon here, or the, operative words too, because I think there are a lot many students here who are engaging with this comics form for the first time. So, these two things are related. Means we need to talk about Chandar Singh Shyam's suicide, because, it will not be an exaggeration to say there is this very troubling act of suicide behind the textual history of Bhimayana. Now, the question, or even that you were trying to pose through the medium of the comics, I will not go into the, the Dalit discourse here, because that will kind of take me to a different realm of interaction. Whenever you look at Bhimayana, you are always made to realize that it tends existence. At one hand, it is trying to restore, valorize, celebrate its own tradition. And on the other, it is kind of constrained by the dynamics and the forces of mainstream media publications. Right. Now, I will kind of point to the fact that the historical epoch that Bhimayana talks about, be it the conversion of Buddhism, or be it when Ambedkar kind of goes to the Prince of Baroda's office and the carpet is rolled out before him, and that is a very dramatic panel that you find in Amur Chitrakatha. Okay. Right. So that panel does not occur in Bhimayana when, as Ambedkar is entering the office, A.R. Dali is kind of rolling out the carpet before him. Right. Now, Anirban, can I ask that, kind of, why this very important act of exclusion does not feature in Bhimayana? Why Bhimayana would always revert to depiction of scenes that have an ecological weightage, one, this is one, and when it comes to documenting history, it is actually conventionally documentary. What do I mean by that? That it will actually, in a way, the modern and contemporary graphic novelists do, they will actually show you newspaper clippings of the Satara agitation, for example. It will have newspaper documentation posted, transplanted on the comic surface into the comic storyline. So I think that is, you know, that is a very problematic area, and as the discussion progresses, I will have some time to think about it. I will have some time to think about it, because Dalit lived experience, this is a point that I have made, and Anirban is specifically pointing, and I think that we are getting a bit refined in terms of jargon here, and the Dalit historiography that Anirban is trying to make. Dalit lived experience is fine. We are doing away with grids, panels, gutters. We are kind of having this colorful foray. But what about Dalit historiography? The documentation of that. The documentation that you find in Bhimayana follows a Western canonical technique. Just like Joe Sacco, the American cartoonist, does in cases of those famous graphic novels like Palestine, where he will actually draw newspaper cuttings, United Nations reports, onto the comics page. So I will have to think about, and that is an important point, because so it kind of again creates a fissure that there are two modalities to engage with Bhimayana. One is Dalit lived experience, and how that Dalit lived experience is brought into a Dalit historiography, and how that historiography is kind of presented as images. There are no animal or anthropomorphic images to present that Dalit historiography in Bhimayana. You will find newspaper clippings reproduced there. Now, I would not be saying that that is a lack. That is not something which the Gondi art form in Bhimayana has been able to find a way out or forward. I think we can, as we discuss later, now we will be able to find a way. Anirban.
Ullan, please.
Yes. Yes. Sagar, I think we need to provide some preliminary information about the text to our students. There are certain things your talk probably missed out, and perhaps deliberately so, because you were focusing on certain other more important issues, as I could see. This is for the students, so these are preliminary notes with which I'll try to respond to your lecture. One, this is a text. The title of this text plays with the Indian epic text of Ramayana. As you can see, it's a portmanteau term that clubs together Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar's Bhim with the last part of Ramayana. And that's how the term comes in Bhimayana. And I think there is a politics of title that we can recognize there. That's one. Secondly, again for the students, this is a text that is at least partly based on Ambedkar's unfinished autobiographical account, Waiting for a Visa. At least the first few pages of the graphic text, Bhimayana, focus on certain episodes of social exclusion, caste-based discrimination, untouchability that Ambedkar had to go through in his life, and later on depicted in his autobiographical account, Waiting for a Visa. These are the pages that visually depict some of those experiences. Now, moving on to some of the issues that you have raised in your talk, and Anirban has tried to underline some other related dimensions of the text. I was thinking of every time I teach this text to my students, discuss it with my students at presidency, I'm struck by the multidimensionality of the text. What do
Kullan,
I mean
just
by that?
1 second. Kullan, can I just 1 second?
Yeah.
You know, you are actually kind of making this kind of endowing the lecture with a completion. Before you end your response, I would just like, because for all of us here, go back to that you know, that element of autobiography that you just spoke about. If you could just, for the benefit of students, kind of finish your response with that, that would be very nice, actually. That's it. Carry on. Okay.
Yeah. So I was thinking of the multidimensionality of the text. The text does a lot of things. You spoke about the newspaper reports on caste-based discrimination, but one of the interesting things that we need to notice when we discuss Bhimayana is that it begins with what we might call contemporaneity of caste. That caste is something that we live with. Whether you are a Dalit or a caste Hindu, it doesn't matter. It is something that you live with. And how does this text do that? How does it make the question of caste a contemporary issue at present? It is something that we live with in our now, in our present time. How does it do this? It does that by certainly by creating this medium, by exploiting this medium, by deploying Gonda, by exploiting the visual medium, by deploying the graphic art form. But it also, because as you kept on emphasizing that the graphic art form creates a sense of immediacy. It's something that constructs that affect, the sense of affect. You are immediately caught up in that sort of diegetic world that you spoke about. But apart from that, it also, in terms of the narrative, it also does this. It creates that sense of immediacy by talking about caste in terms of reservation, something that we find somewhat problematic to discuss. It is a point that we usually try to put under the carpet. So it begins with a conversation between a young girl and a boy who talk about why there is caste-based discrimination and how it can be countered, or the role of the quota system, the reservation system. And the moment you encounter that conversation right at the beginning of this text, you are not simply encountering the autobiographical account of Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, the incomplete, unfinished text waiting for a visa, or a graphic representation of that particular text. It's certainly not that. So, it is the representation of Ambedkar's life to the extent that it follows Ambedkar's unfinished autobiographical text waiting for a visa. It also deploys an indigenous tribal art form in a particular genre that is otherwise predominantly Western. It deploys the Gond art form. It extrapolates different newspaper items that speak about the persistence of caste, to borrow that phrase from Anant Tumle's book, eponymous with an eponymous title, the persistence of caste. So it does too many things. And that multidimensionality of the text is very important for me, because it is not simply about how it departs from the Western graphic art form in terms of how it deploys Gond art form. It's not simply about Ambedkar's life. It certainly speaks about certain episodes in Ambedkar's life, but it is not just that. This is one point that it puts together, it deploys too many methods, not just in terms of the graphic art form, but also in terms of the narrative strategy. You Now, this leads me to the next point, and that is where I want to compare it with Amar Chitra Katha. And I will be very, happy to get your response on that. The moment you look at Amar Chitra Katha representation of Ambedkar, there is one Amar Chitra Katha representation of Ambedkar as well. If you look at that particular text, it begins with how a saint comes, visits Ambedkar's house before he is born, and tells his father that a great man is going to be born in your family. And immediately you are caught up in this idea that a great man is going to be born. And those of us who have read Ambedkar know that Ambedkar was always very skeptical about this great man theory, that some messianic figure will come and solve every problem that we encounter. Although, ironically, Ambedkar himself has been made into that kind of a larger-than-life figure, to be worshipped rather than to be raised, rather than to be studied with care and attention. But that's the sad part of our lives, anyway. But the more important thing for me is that, if you juxtapose this particular narrative with the graphic narrative of Amar Chitra Katha representation of Ambedkar, then you realize that despite the fact that both the texts follow Ambedkar's life, by and large, they are remarkably different in terms of not just the visual part, which you spoke about at length, but also in terms of its ideological focus. And as far as I can see, there isn't any incongruity between the ideological priorities of Amar Chitra Katha and the graphic art form that Amar Chitra Katha presents. Those panels, proper Western format of those, that the sequential art form that comics medium is all about. And if you look at Bhimayana's ideological focus and the way it experiments with the graphic art format by deploying those that Gund art form, by refusing to put these characters into boxes, into panels, by refusing to provide us with simple speech bubbles. If you look at the text, I'm sure you have noticed this and perhaps also discuss it with your students when you teach it. But today it was somehow not mentioned, so I'm trying to underline this. If you look at the speech bubbles, there are two kinds of speech bubbles that you encounter in Bhimayana. There is one kind of speech bubble where you see a swan-like speech bubble, which is basically about empathy, basically about making efforts, those speech acts that try to make an effort to empathize with the Dalits, which make an effort to recognize the stigmatization of caste that we live with, etc. And the other kind of speech bubbles are depicted with a sting, as if it's the sting of a scorpion.
The scorpion.
It has a kind of toxicity with it. So these are these graphic features are certainly there, but for me it is very important to put the ideological, the political alongside this focus on the graphic, or to put it in a more abstracted sense, the aesthetic part of the text. And there isn't, as I said, for me, there isn't any conflict between these two. They complement each other. Just as the ideological priorities of Amar Chitra Katha are sort of matched by its graphic features. I think it will be lovely if you could speak a little more on that, this merger of the ideological with the graphic or the aesthetic. Yeah.
Yes, can I speak on it, Bharat?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I think Kollan made a Kollan made a very few points, Professor Das here, and I would just takes me back to a long few years when I actually Kollan invited me to his institute to speak about, and that is this, and what transpired back then was we always felt to, Kollan mentioned something very important, because the kind of the kind of very interesting speech bubbles which Vimana uses, of the swan and the scorpion. So, talking about this within a time frame of 1.5 hours is
Yeah.
not easy, but I think we can also, Kullan has already very importantly hinted that, to what extent we can consider Vimayana as an extension of what Ambedkar has followed, studied, or advocated. But my point was also that setting up ideological priorities, in departure from the kind of modes or the ideological priorities which the brand of Amar Chitra Katha has, is a question that has to be dealt, of course. But in recent years, the kind of productions or the visual productions that we have seen from other publication houses, I can remember, of course, Tara from Chennai, who is also using the Gond art to visualize other forms of urban and civic spaces. And I think this is just a way to extend what Kollan and Anirban was trying cumulatively to say. That, when you take the Gondi art form to express and visualize something radically different, and this is something very hypothetical. Say, there is a beautiful Gondi painting by, as far as I remember, by the Durga Vyam herself, which depicts the Bhopal gas tragedy.
Right.
Right. Now, the question I would simply put, because I can find, I really couldn't kind of go into the intricacies of every panel here, because I was more interested, keen to kind of give my students an point of entry into this story world, that at least you would be equipped with a few basic infrastructural or comics grammar before you kind of enter and engage with this affective kind of environment and the historiography that is associated with it. So when Durgabai kind of composes this very beautiful Gondi painting on the Bhopal gas tragedy, the one thing that I startlingly felt that, there is a kind of, Dalit or a subaltern visual index that is somehow carried to this documentation or depiction of the urban space. So this visual idiom, I really, for want of a better label, for want of a better category, Kollan and Anirban, people who are present here and still there with us, still here with us, that for want of a better, this Dalit visual aesthetics somehow sticks to this Gondi practice of visually documenting experiences when the scene changes from such places of exclusion and humiliation to depiction of other more violent, but not necessarily related to caste, mind you, violent scenarios. So, I was kind of, and Kollan kind of, very,